Alright, so let's take a look over here at how we are going to start setting up for VDI. One of the things that's really important with the whole setup for VDI is making sure that you've got everything plumbed and ready to go. In general, when you're starting it out, you probably want to make sure that you have the network set so that you can have your VM, which I believe will be using one of these two, able to communicate over to DNS and be able to reach your connection server. And then also making sure that if you're going to use a grid GPU, that grid GPU can reach its grid license server. So a grid GPU does require a license server. I believe they have it now at a point where it can be containerized. So that would be nice, being able to get it into Tanzu at some point in the future. But for right now, very, very simple, low-level install of your favorite Linux version. Go ahead and add the package and get your license assignment from NVIDIA. So because these are all the want to say, what is it, the D300 series. So these E309Ds, these are all very, very small home lab style boxes. So I don't have room to put anything in here. I could try to get an NVIDIA card in there, but it definitely would require some type of external, add-on to the chassis. Um, but what we're looking at is we're going to need to add the drivers to the host in order to make it so that it can share that NVIDIA card. With a grid GPU, really what you're doing is you're able to dice it up. So on something like a T4 card, you'll have the ability to run it as, I believe, two 16 gig cards, four 8 gig cards, or I mean, you can break it all the way down into like 32 1 gig add-ons for worker desktops. The thing is that when it comes to a Xeon processor, there is no GPU capability there, so it is going to tax that processor in order to get any types of graphics out of it. Also, in general, when you're looking at a GPU, you're talking about RAM that's like DDR version 6 versus DDR 3 or 4 that you'd find in your standard server. So you're going to have a completely different type of RAM. You're going to have parallel processing versus serial processing. So a lot of different things going on that make it so you'd want to add a grid GPU for any intense graphics. So looking into here, what we would want to do here, the instructions up here on the VMware website, is we would want to make sure that we've downloaded the grid drivers and make sure we have everything we need there. NVIDIA bundles it so it'll be just one giant package that has both the driver for your VMware host, KVM hosts, I believe Azure hosts, I don't know, Hyper-V, and then it'll also have it for your standard clients. So your Windows and Linux clients will also have a driver inside that same package. What you're looking at is information on what you're doing on the NVIDIA website. This is old information here. The whole, Xorg stop and all this stuff. It's a VIB. You can go and install the VIB and then reboot afterwards. I believe that there may be some instructions in more recent versions to set memory sharing to off. So I'll try and find that and add in, the actual command structure on another, little segment here. So, but you can find the instructions here. Go back over. You're going to go ahead and get into this guy through SSH. You'll go ahead and run through that command list, and honestly, it's a very, very small list. But when we go over here and we take a look at our packages, once you install the grid GPU driver, it will show up in here. Now, a warning for old versions is if you're also running, vSAN and NSX, in our case, the file service and the Kubernetes implementation, there was an issue with the boot bank not being large enough. So I believe in version 7 that is resolved. A lot of times from the host, what you're going to end up doing, and this will also require a reboot, is you'll go ahead and you'll go into your configuration, into the, let's see, PCI devices, and you'll select a PCI device, and then you've got the pass-through enabled and all PCI. So if we find one of these and go, okay, uh, we'll pretend that this is the NVIDIA, and you should see the vendor name and all that good stuff. Click on that. You go ahead and check it for um, pass through. So there will be, the configure pass through button, all that good stuff. So you just need to be able to turn it on, and then reboot your system. From that point, you should be able to then share it to a VM on that system. So, right click, tell it to get into the PCI device. Now, when you boot that system up again, what's going to end up happening is it will not see it inside your Linux box until you have the driver. And once you have the driver, you are not going to see the screen from the VMware vCenter console anymore. It is going to output to that grid GPU. The pre-flight here is going to be, you have to have your Active Directory server, so make sure you've got your Active Directory up and running, everything's good to go there. Make sure you can log in with a specific user account. And then you're going to have to build your connection server, which currently is a Windows server. I believe they are working on an appliance. So from inside, alright, so we have our Windows server here. This is just a Windows server, added the domain. It's up and running. We've moved the software for the Horizon over here into this PC's local drive. And so we just go through the basics. You come on in, got Horizon. Where are we putting the connection server? We just need a standard server. So there are, other pieces and parts here, the replica security and enrollment server. When you start getting into that level, you're going to want to start discussing design with more than likely your sales guy. Like if you needed to reach outside to a DMZ, you're going to want that security server to sit on the DMZ to reach back into your connection server. And preferences of IP protocol, of course, IPv4 is good enough for us. Alright, so we're going to hit OK. Configure automatically. Don't feel like doing that. And install. So, very quick, very easy, goes through the installer. You'll now have your connection server. Now this is just going to be, light database, the ability to reach over to your vCenter server to review systems, and then an interface for you to connect to those systems. So there's just not a whole lot to this. One of the issues that I've seen is when you're in an environment that is 100% Linux, you don't want to have that Windows infrastructure requirement. And that has been probably the biggest thorn in my side with this, is the VDI having that Windows requirement. But if you look at it realistically, the vast majority of people that are really consuming all of the VDI, they're doing it with Windows desktops. So, alright, getting its HTML server. Alright, don't really need the documentation. Just going to go ahead and hit finish. Now we're also on version 7.12, which really fairly meaningless statement there. Version 8 just came out. They have migrated everything over to use an API a lot more so than hand jamming all this stuff in. Alright, so one of the key things that we want to make sure we do is use the fully qualified domain name when we go to log in. So you'll go ahead and put in the view.funlab.local for my view server at my fun local domain. And it's going to be new admin/new admin. And it'll go ahead and bring you to the new admin portal. So there used to be /admin that would bring you to a Flash-based portal. The new admin brings you to the HTML5, and I believe they're deprecating out that Flash piece. So I believe that'll be gone very soon, and we'll just be back to admin. So inside of here, some of the things that we'll want to do for our initial setup is we're going to go ahead and make sure we authenticate with our vCenter server. So that's going to be your typical server address, and I believe we do a fully qualified domain name, username, password, your typical piece parts here. go through. We're not using a view composer. Storage will be a piece that's configured in there to generally with composer, where you're going to put all these VMs. So it'll have, things like this: storage acceleration, space reclamation. For gateways, this is where I was talking about the secure gateway. So the secure gateway itself is where you would want to have something sitting on a DMZ, or if you're in between multiple zones, they need to be able to communicate. Like your connection server is going to want to sit where your VMs are. If you need to get to that area in a secure fashion, then you'd want to have that secure gateway sitting in between in a DMZ area, or in between segments. For our connection servers, it's what we just installed, and gives all kinds of good options here. There's some automatic backup stuff that's going on, so pretty good stuff. We're not going to worry about instant clone. So instant clone is, you need to throw out 50 machines that are all the same. There's licensing and usage. There's all kinds of different licensing. I recall back when they still had ThinApp, and you could go ahead and basically run an install of an application with ThinApp, and then it would package it into a single executable, and then you could share that executable from inside of Horizon. So they have other application products that do that now, but pretty interesting, cool stuff that can be done. You've got some global settings here, timeout. This is where you're going to be mucking around to make sure that you're meeting the corporate security requirements. You get your general settings, you got your security settings, got client restriction settings. So you can go ahead and start setting up, your typical administrator. These people are allowed to log in from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we don't have any registered machines. And that was another fun part, is if you have a remote desktop server with, I believe it was Windows Server 2012 maybe, you could go ahead and set up remote desktop hosts to issue out desktops to the Horizon. So for the administrators, we always really want to do the domain admins. So if we were to go in here and look for the domain, there it is. Now we have the domain admins and their administrators. For everything. So if you're having separation of privileges, obviously you'd set up something that's your Horizon admins. For the type of environments that I generally set up, usually the only administrative function here is going to be, VDI and your DNS and Active Directory. So really, it's just the same group for most of what I do. Not worried about the CloudPod architecture, so this is, where you can do all kinds of fun stuff through VDI between different environments. And event configuration is to create a database, so we can, go ahead and set up, I believe it's Postgres or something like that, just to have a database for all of the logs with this. Global policies, so multimedia redirection, USB and PC over IP. The global policies here are, multimedia redirection, where you're pointing your multimedia elsewhere to render it, and USB access. In a lot of secure environments, you're going to disallow USB access. If you're using PC over IP and have a zero client, you can also do that USB access per device inside the PC over IP firmware. And the PC over IP hardware acceleration, that's some pretty good stuff. JMP, so the just-in-time management platform, we're not dealing with this right now. So this case right now is going to be getting a Linux VDI client out on a screen. So you can go into our inventory and we can take a look at our desktops. So we can see these two. These are old desktops. I'm pretty sure I can go ahead and, there we go, remove that. So we're not managing that anymore. Surprisingly, you can delete these from disk, and I believe that's because of the instant clone and the composed versions. If you've got 50 VMs and all of a sudden they're standing up because you've got failed ones, they're standing up new ones. You'd have to go through and start clicking to delete a lot of those. So that's just one of the things that we can do. You may want to try to limit and be aware that you're capable of doing that. So what we want to make sure of, let's go ahead and kill our session here. What we want to make sure of is that we can ping to the system that we actually want to ping to. So we've been able to perform an NS lookup of the system that we want to get to. So now we need to get into this system. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and go through the order of operations of installing the client onto your Linux box. So one of the things that you really want to make sure of is when you're inside of your vCenter, that your system, you're going to go ahead and edit the settings. If you're going to use NVIDIA Grid, you want to go ahead and add the new device, and that'll be underneath the shared PCI device. So because we don't have those drivers installed, there we go. It's going to complain because it's powered on. Let's go ahead and just real quick drop it onto one of these. But there would usually be a shared PCI device or a shared device. So with that, it should show up in here. Otherwise, the PCI device, yeah, need to be reserved. You need to make sure that it's available from the host. So the order of operations here is to make sure that we can see the view server. So let's go ahead and look up, let's see, what name was that? view.funlab.local. There we go. We can definitely see view.funlab.local. We've already pinged from view, so we know we can see that from here. So let's go into our downloads where, pardon me, our documents, where we have our Horizon agent. So, gotta unzip it and tar it first. Alright. Of course, we can go ahead and run this all as one single command, but, Alright, so inside of here we will have our view agent. I believe we've got, install view agent. So just a / install. Yes. It needs light DM. So make sure you have access to your repositories. This is going to be a constant. So go through running all of your different dependencies here. Alright. And now we're able to install. Should be fairly similar to the other next finish. So yeah, there you go. Everything is already taken care of there. Alright, so restart the system for the configurations, and so yeah, that's just a simple reboot. Now, this reboot can be done now, or if you have your NVIDIA driver for your grid GPU and you can do a dmessage to find your NVIDIA GPU. So what that looks like is that. So you're going to look for your NVIDIA driver by going through dmessage, right? It's going to find in here the NVIDIA mod probe. Nothing's really working there. But if you had your grid GPU, it would locate it. It would tell you that it tried to find it. It maybe had a kernel taint for a Nouveau driver or something ridiculous like that. But you're going to want to make sure that it's there before you install the driver. Once you install the driver, like I said, you're not going to see this screen anymore. So reboot. And we'll go ahead and log back in. Now we have this, we can go ahead and go into our desktops and we can add our desktop. So we want a manual desktop pool. We're looking at a vCenter virtual machine. Yeah, we're looking at our vCenter. User assignment, you can do an automatic assignment or a multi-user assignment. So I believe this is there we go, multi-user assignment. This may be what you want if you need to have multiple people working on it. You can also have it floating so that the assignment doesn't stick. This is usually the ideal so that you don't lock it to a single person. Desktop ID, we're going to have this as our NSX Ubuntu. Our pool settings here, right? So no restrictions, no category folders. We can do all kinds of fun stuff in here. We can tell it that it's always powered on, so when the system boots, it makes sure that that's on. Session desktop type, we can do desktop application or both. So like I said, they do have tools to make it so you can just push through an application. Automatically log off after disconnect. We can do it after 2 hours. Yeah, sure. Allow the users to reset. Maybe you want to hold them, keep them away from that. Maybe it's mission critical that they're able to reset. And if you want them to be able to go ahead and spin this up on different desktops. So let's say you've got 5 workstations and you're working from one, looking at this VDI, and you want to be able to open it up at a different desk, you would say yes. Display protocol, VMware Blast. So PC over IP actually is, you're going to be locked into the Teradici system there. And PC over IP isn't bad. It's a pretty good one, but you need to have a Teradici client in order to use it. VMware Blast can do HTML5, so good to work with there. This is where you would select your NVIDIA Grid GPU, right? So we're going to go ahead and put automatic, but NVIDIA Grid GPU, you'll notice it blacks out all of this stuff, right? So this is going to be set with how you dish out your NVIDIA Grid GPU. And let's go ahead and give this guy 256 megabytes, maximum 2 monitors. Looks like we have a maximum size there. And allow session collaboration. This is to have 2 people on the same. So not necessary. You may find that it's a security setting that you're not allowed to have somebody else look at it at the same time. And we look at the virtual machine. So this guy right here, that is our virtual machine that we're going for. Okay, so storage acceleration, yeah, this is just some back-end stuff that not really going to affect you if you're using fast, modern, high-speed stuff. By the time this would affect you, you should already have some deeper understanding of Vue, be a little bit more involved in it. The transparent page sharing, if you understand what that is, that's deduplication of memory. So that is where you got Microsoft Windows running and you've got 20 copies of Windows 10. Then they're going to go ahead and dedupe the memory basically for the operating system minimum. And that way, whatever needs to stay inside of your active RAM, it's going to store 1 copy and point to it for all of those systems. Okay, we're going to entitle users after adding the pool, right? All right. And let's go ahead and see if I'm in here. Hey, there I am. All right. Okay. There we go. So I am entitled to this system. I am now able to get to it, right? So we can look at the machine. So this NSX Ubuntu 03. You can see there's no assigned users. We can see what host it's running on. The waiting for agent communication, that's one of those like, okay, let me double check, make sure there's no firewalls going. Make sure that the service is running. And so from inside of here, we go ahead and do a system control status of firewalld or firewall. No firewall running. I believe they use a UFW. When you end up with that NVIDIA grid driver, you can end up in a pretty bad place. If you're unable to... Alright, good. The uncomplicated firewall is inactive. That's good. With the NVIDIA grid driver installed and the inability to log in directly to the system, you're going to need to be able to SSH into it. So make sure that you have SSH capability. Let's go ahead and take a look at... this directory in view agent service. So let's go ahead and look at the view agent. And it's active, so we're good to go there. For the NVIDIA grid, you will need to go into etc NVIDIA grid conf and make sure that it's pointing to your license server and picking out what type of card it's using. So this guy right here is now available. So if we go ahead and we open up just this, there we go. Now we can log in.